think it's probably more likely to be Russia, but not, the Russian state itself. They've got this modus operandi of paying criminal gangs to carry out sort of disruptive activity in Europe. And so I think that probably the most likely option is it's someone that's being paid by the Russians to do this.
Over the last week, sinister drones have been spotted flying near US Air Force bases in the UK, but it wasn't clear who was sending them or controlling them. Now, the UK military has deployed about 60 troops dedicated to finding out what's going on. Well, to help us find out what's going on, let's speak to the Times' defence editor, Larissa Brown. Hello, Larissa.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us. Good to have you on the programme. How big of a threat are these drones?
Well, from what I can gather, they haven't got they aren't armed drones, so they'll be used primarily for surveillance purposes or just to try and cause some chaos at these US Air Force bases. And it's also not clear from both US and UK sources exactly how many of these there are or exactly what type, other than a Pentagon spokesperson did say last night that there are different types and different configurations flying. But it's all a bit of a confusing picture. We don't know who's actually flying these, which I think is quite telling in itself, because if it had been, a hobbyist, then you would have hoped that the Americans and the British together would have been able to find that person and stop them flying them, but they haven't been able to. And actually, we heard from a US Air Force spokesperson just a few moments ago who said that these small drones are continuing to operate in the vicinity of 4 US Air Force bases in England.
Wow. OK, so what's the next step? What will the UK military be doing then to combat this?
We heard last night that the MOD had dispatched 60 British troops to these 4 bases, and their primary purpose, I'm told, is to use a counter drone system called AUKUS that is able to basically detect these drones and try and find out who's flying them. So that's their main purpose, but they're also going to be assisting them and offering any other advice that they can. So I think the primary focus here is to obviously stop these drones being flown, and to do that, they need to find who actually is flying them. One source told me yesterday that actually the Russian involvement couldn't be ruled out, but the investigation is still continuing, and so they do not know who is flying them at the moment.
What else can be done? Can they be shot down? Can they be caught in some kind of way? Or is it a sort of a software thing of tracing them back to find the operator?
This AUKUS system can work in 2 ways, and one of those is that it's got this what they call an electronic sniper rifle, and it effectively jams the system of the drone and makes it fall out of the sky. Alternatively, it can actually override the command system of the drone and operate the drone and turn it back on itself and try and find the person flying it. So it's a specifically very complex and highly sophisticated system. And I just spoke to someone at the defence firm Leonardo who actually produced this system, and they were saying that they will be able to use that system to find out exactly what drones are operating. And he was quite confident that they would be able to find who is responsible.
Is there any way this could be innocent? You said it was unlikely to be hobbyists, but some kind of hobbyist, people who just want to have a look at US air bases, want to check out the jets, something like that. Is that being considered?
The Americans and the Brits have said that they don't think it's hobbyists because it's been, they've continually flown these drones over a number of days. It started last week, whereas, a hobbyist would probably just do it as a one-off. A source did tell me yesterday they thought it might be something sinister. That was a military source from the UK side. But I think the upshot of it is that actually nobody really knows at this stage.
And look, if it wasn't, who's it? Who else could it be then? Would the suspicion most likely fall on Russia or perhaps on China? What would we think?
I think it's probably more likely to be Russia, but not, the Russian state itself. They've got this modus operandi of paying criminal gangs to carry out sort of disruptive activity in Europe. And so I think that probably the most likely option is it's someone that's being paid by the Russians to do this. And of course, we may all find out at the end of this week that actually it's just some random people, teenagers poking fun at the U.S. military. But I find that hard to believe, given what's going on and what we saw last week with Britain and America changing their minds and allowing Ukraine to fire long-range missiles into Russia, which clearly really annoyed President Putin.
Yeah, I'm sure we all remember the Gatwick drone, which I think was never found, and I think might not have actually been there, and still managed to shut down the airport. If in the worst case scenario, then if this is Russia or indeed another state, what would it be for? Would it be espionage, or would it be designed to sort of sow fear and confusion and just harass?
I don't think it would be for espionage. An RAF source was saying to me yesterday, you can just go on Google Earth and see a layout of the US Air Force bases. I think this is more likely just to send a message that we can operate these drones. You can't find them easily. In theory, we could put explosives on them, which would cause it obviously an extreme threat. And just to cause chaos and confusion and disorder, which the Russians like to do.
And finally, Larissa, is there some sort of shock or at least disappointment that we appear to be so helpless at this? Because you'd think, these are crafts, if these are crafts taking off in Britain, flying over bits of Britain, flying over US air bases, you'd think this couldn't happen more than once. And the impression one gets is that they're more or less doing it with impunity.
I have to say I'm pretty staggered that they haven't been able to say who is behind it. Yesterday, the military did say they still didn't know, which really did surprise me, given these drones first started flying last week. I would have thought that using these systems, such as the AUKUS, they would have already been able to locate the person or the people who are flying them. Obviously, AUKUS, we were told, was deployed yesterday, so it may be that they're just getting that system up and running, but it doesn't bode well for a wartime scenario where these drones might be laden with explosives flying over military bases.
Absolutely not. Look, thank you very much indeed, Larissa Brown. Larissa is, of course, the Times' defense editor.
They are being actively monitored. Installation leaders have determined so far that none of these incursions impact the base residents, the facilities, or the assets that we have on those bases. We're, of course, continuing to work with host nation authorities and our mission partners to ensure the safety of our personnel, our facilities, and the equipment. The bottom line is it's something that we're going to take seriously. We're continuing to look into it, but as of right now has not had any significant mission impact. Again, this is something that we'll look into. As you know, small UASs, drones, have become something that's, relatively common now across the landscape. It's something that the department has been looking closely at in terms of how it applies to our facilities, our personnel, whether it's in combat zones or outside of combat zones. But in terms of these particular incidents in the UK versus the ones in the States, again, I don't want to speculate that there's any connection.
They don't appear to be those of hobbyists. Is that correct?
Again, it would be, premature to draw any conclusions. We've got to see what these are. I mean, it's entirely possible that it could be hobbyists or something else. We just got to look into it.